Good afternoon, everybody. How's everyone doing today? Wonderful. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time out of the day to come join us. Hopefully, I've met most of you in the room. If we haven't, I'm Peter Nordenberg. I'm the Director of Investments and Operations Manager at Gentian Financial. Luckily for us today, we were actually able to have everyone here. I know usually there's one of us that's missing, and this time of the year, annually, Lisa's either in a wheelchair or with a cane. So she just had knee replacement surgery 2 weeks ago, so we're very happy that she could join us. But Chris and Ken will take a little bit of time once they get up here to walk through each of our individual roles to get you more comfortable with how we work as a team. As I talk about every time I'm up here, we spend a lot of time investing in you, attending conferences, meetings, things of that nature. As you know, the whole team was in Washington, D.C. in May for the Raymond James National Conference for Professional Development. We're a member of the Academy of Preferred Financial Advisors. They hold 3 forums every year. Chris and Zach have already attended. I'll be attending the one next week. Chris and Ken are both members of Ed Slott's Master Elite IRA Advisor Group. It's the foremost group for IRA tax planning. So they've already attended his workshop in May, and they'll be attending the one, actually it's the end of this month, end of October. Chris attends Abundance 360 every January. That's where he gets all of his technology information. Chris and I are a member of Strategic Coach. We bring a lot of tools back to the team to implement to make us more productive for you. So there's a lot we're involved in, which is very exciting, which helps us get to Chris. As I mentioned last time, 2017, Chris was named to the Raymond James Chairman's Council, which is the highest level you can achieve as a Raymond James financial advisor, which means he's in the top 45 of about 6,000 advisors nationwide. His name is up there, but he'll be the first one to tell you that the only reason it's there is the trust that you've placed in him and our team. So thank you very much. It's as much an award for you as it is for him or us. Also in 2018, Chris was named the number 10 advisor in the state of Wisconsin by Forbes magazine. So that is a very high accomplishment for him and for you as a group, as our clients. So we're very excited about that. That's actually it. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Chris Doty and Ken Flannery.
Is your life simple? Would you like your life to be simpler? Not a word, but we can make it that way. So something we're going to talk about here is our process of reducing the complexity of your life, reducing the complexity of some of our programs and what we show you as well, and getting to what's important. For me, a big part of this too is reflection. Today, does anybody else share this in the fall? Fall seems to me to be a great time for reflection. A time to kind of stand back, look at what you've done for the year, look at what you've done in life, look at what's happened. And for something that's very natural for me about reflection in the fall. So what's interesting for me this time of year, it becomes part of what we do. We're going to talk a little bit more about that piece as well. But you do all know what I like to do to begin with every single program, right? I go big. So right now is the time with which you should be grabbing your pens. If you don't have it, we'll help or come out and get you some. We'll get you a piece of paper if you need as well. So if you need anything, Lisa will roll around and give it to you. We'll send her out to do so. But take 90 seconds to look over something over the past quarter or last 6 months that you're really proud of, you're grateful for. It can be as simple as sometimes when we play the gratitude game in the car, my windshield. I'm grateful for tires. I'm grateful for rain. So, but look at that. Give us 60 to 90 seconds. Go ahead and I'll watch. Take a minute. Please write down something you're grateful for in the last 90 or 180 days. It's fun. I love when everybody's looking down, still writing, because these lists are getting longer and longer. It's awesome. When you truly look at what you're grateful for and it begins to become part of you, you're going to find a lot of things that you can find you're grateful for. So as is normal, I'll begin and kind of share some of mine. Mine is that a week ago I got to spend a week with my wife only in a foreign country called Switzerland, and conquer the fear of something maybe some of you have, which is called the fear of falling. Not the fear of heights, because I'm not afraid of heights, but afraid of falling. I got to jump off a mountain and paraglide over Interlaken. So you want to talk about conquering fear quick? You had about 24 steps before you had to conquer it. There you were. Also, the past month, we've got to do a bunch of camping with my daughters over the weekends and go to Apostle Islands. Spending family time and the gratitude of being able to get to know your wife and your kids better and go through, there's so much fun that comes from it. Memories, songs. We got a camping song we play now every breakfast, every time, and it annoys the heck out of my girls, which means it works. And it's even funnier because they're coming up with verses. So giving you just a few things that I'm grateful for, I can go, the list goes on and on and on and on. That most importantly, too, is that you have spent your time with us here today. We know that your time is one of the most critical elements and resources you have, and sharing it with us is extremely meaningful. So we really, really appreciate that, too. As is customary as well, before we move on, I want to share Ken's gratitude.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got back from Disney. As you know, I have 4 kids, 7, 5, 3, and 2. And I can tell you a lot about the Disney experience, but more importantly, what happened at Disney was even more touching because I had a chance to spend some time with my little 2-year-old on the carousel. So we rode that thing about 50 times in a row, right? Because they love that, right? So my other kids were with my wife and grandpa and grandpa. But I was sitting next to him on the horse, going up and down, and there was a 7-year-old girl right next to me. And she looked at me and she said, your boy is really, really handsome. And I was like, well, thank you. I'm like, well, you're a little princess yourself. And she goes, well, a lot of people don't think so. And I said, well, what do you mean? She goes, I actually get bullied at school. And so I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to talk with her a little bit on the ride for like 30 seconds. And I was asking her more about it. Her mom was 2 horses over. And after the ride, I said, hey, I'm sure you know this, probably about your daughter, but she's actually getting bullied at school. And she said, I had no idea that this was happening. So if there's any way that could work out to the point where we have some impact on that girl's life, it's fantastic. It actually really struck me pretty deeply. Mm-hmm. If there could be a bully police at school, I don't know how this works out, but there's a lot of kids getting bullied, I'm pretty sure, at school. And I don't know how to solve it, but I'd be open to hearing it because it's actually really impactful for me. Mm-hmm. The second part of it is that I'm grateful for you allowing me to sit in meetings with you. So as we add service to your scenario, a lot of you could have easily said, who's the new guy, right? Who's the new guy sitting with me right now? And so thank you for not letting that wall go up and opening up to me and allowing me to help you with your financial scenario because I'm very committed to that. So there's nothing we can't accomplish as a team together. Correct. So I just want to say thank you for allowing me the opportunity to meet with you as well. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Ken. So what I want to go through as well here just a bit is I am grateful for something else here. And you see some of the things that we get as awards. And when you look at this for myself, I'm grateful for the fact that we have this group right here. And you remember when I started, it was myself and an assistant. Pretty much it. Myself, assistant, and then a partner and an assistant. But as we've looked over time, one of the most important things to me has been service. So about 12 years ago, you see somebody over here who's standing there, Peter, joined our team, right? Yes? Haven't sent, it was great. And he does a bunch of work for us. And for many of you, you may talk to him more than me now because he's the backbone of the office when I'm not there. Ken himself and Zach is beginning to step in those positions. Now you say that as well. When it comes to anything client, it's Lisa. So what's interesting about this is going through our financial team, you've obviously been hearing some stories about Ken. Ken is our lead and senior retirement planner. He was in the industry for 11 years before us, but we originally hired him 12 or 13 years ago to work with myself and my business partner at the time. He went out and got the CFP credentials and has been a financial planner at a major firm for 11 years. He's our senior and lead retirement planner. So the nice thing about adding him to your team is you get this. You have me, you have the expertise, but you get this as just an additive. Nothing more, just more service. The same thing as we've added just recently, Zach. Zach has been in the industry for 3 years. Matter of fact, October 1st, he told us yesterday, was his 3-year mark of the day he started studying the Series 7, which he passed with flying colors. He's our resident study expert, but he's been in the industry for 3 years, with us for 8 months. And the beautiful thing about Zach, if you've ever wanted to meet a 25-year-old, a millennial with an old soul, he's probably more like 50 than 25. So whatever they say about millennials, he may debunk that myth, which is great. He's been fantastic in that. Also, as a part of our team here, Lisa is here, which you heard she had surgery on her knee to get rid of some of the pain that she has, but she's vital to all of your function as well whenever it comes to lead client information, things that you need. She's a get-it-done kind of person. She joined me probably, was it 6 years ago, Lisa? Almost 7 years ago as well. So you'll see we added her to our team. What a phenomenal addition, even though at first you couldn't understand her. It's okay. It's okay because sometimes she says a word, and I kid you not, we have a British American dictionary. I have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't realize that's what that meant. But it's great. It's great to have you back as well. You also know Ashley. Ashley from our team, she's been running around here, flitting around. She's in charge of client experience. So putting this on, making sure you're comfortable, making sure we've got the meals, so the whole thing is set so that I literally can walk in and talk. It's really what I'm good at, just walking in and talking. So preparation would not be good for me. She's done all of it. So she's a vital team member to us as well. What I find with this team is we may get awards. We may get all these awards. These people are why that happens. My name may be on it, but you and they are why this happens, okay? Not necessarily just me. Ken, why don't you introduce the last
that's also Julie. A lot of you had a chance to meet Julie. It's Julie Deason over there if you want to say hi to everybody.
Absolutely.
Julie's been a great addition to the team. I think almost 2 years now.
Yes.
2 years coming up here pretty soon. She's in charge of opening up new accounts, money movement. So when you call in and say, "Hey, send me some money. I need to buy a new car," she helps with that. She helps with scheduling reviews. So she's really good. She's also getting to know all of you as well. So she's been a great addition to the team. She is Mrs. West Bend.
Oh, yeah.
She knows everything and everybody in West Bend. I came to the meeting the other day. She's talking to who turns out is a client, and they're neighbors with each other. They're like backdoor neighbors, right? So if you've driven through West Bend and you didn't even stop, there's a chance she knows you. Okay? That's how much she knows West Bend. So she's had over 32 years experience. She's fantastic to the team. So that's Julie Deason,
Yes,
everybody.
absolutely.
Last but not least, Kristen Ellsworth. She's the happiest go lucky person I've ever met in my whole entire life. If you're ever feeling bad, call her because she will lift you up just like that.
Yes.
But she's fantastic. She's doing some marketing for us on the video stuff that you see going on right now. She's responsible for getting that organized along with some other team members as well. She's also in charge of our Gentian charitable arm, if you will. So a lot of times we get to know you so well in your churches and organizations that you're part of. We end up managing those accounts as well for your churches. We have some endowment funds as well that we manage, and she's really in charge of that area. She's really good at it. So if you ever have any questions or opportunities, she might be the first one to reach out to. She's also a major part of Prevent Blindness. Again, some of you may know that already, but if you don't know it, ask her about it. She's very passionate about that. She has some great stories. So that's Kristen Ellsworth, everybody.
Yes, absolutely. One thing about bringing these people on our team, or anyone, we interview a lot of people, okay? Used to be me interviewing, but I got smart. First person to interview people are them. They're my family in the office. They need to approve somebody before I do, because I'm not going to hire them without their approval. That's how close-knit we are. I trust these people implicitly, every member of my team. There are a lot of people who would love to come work with us, but if it's a maybe, if it's like, well, it could work out, my answer is no. My answer is no, because that's how important it is for people I bring to you. So can you trust Ken? Can you trust that? Can you trust everyone up here? The answer is, if you trust me, you'll trust them. Okay, so just want to give you that part of it as well. And I don't think I explained it probably as well in the past as that, but this is really a vital part of what we do in our service. And now let me get a bit in, and actually, let me give them a hand. They're really awesome. Fantastic. Please. So thank you. So I like to do something like that each time we have a program like this, but you also know I always like to start with something funny. And actually, Ken had a good joke for me a little earlier. It's a joke about paper, but it was terrible.
That was terrible.
That was terrible, but I told you I'd tell dad jokes, and I always like to start with something funny. I thought that was funny. Got another one. How about this? How many apples grow on a tree? All of them. I heard these from kids. She says you heard these from kids, but wisdom says from the mouths of babes, keep those jokes because you can use them later. to astound your friends and parents. There's a few more I have, but we'll continue on. One of our goals that we do here is we talk about behavioral science in a lot of projects. Now, we're not going to go over these as in-depth as we do. We have a bunch of charts you normally see, and I like that for the traditionalist that wants to see them. But we're going to kind of minimize some of those because we want to get to what's important. We've been listening and talking to you, and as we kind of move forward, we want to be contributors in your life. Don't get me wrong, though. We don't need to be your life coach. We're not the most pervasive person in your family, we know as well. But we do help you manage a resource, which is money. But to a lot of you, it's about the planning around that money that's important. And I think over 25 years, this reflection has allowed me to see money is simply a resource that allows you to do something else. That something else is unique to each one of you, and that's something that we know we do. So as much as it is about money, we've got phenomenal systems. Don't worry, we still concentrate heavily on that. But we're learning more and more, reading great books on the best investors of all time, studying Warren Buffett, Graham, Dodd, some of the history. It's phenomenal. But what we're also realizing is that there's a simplicity to what we want to present to you that makes it more impactful in a story, in a parable, in some sort of example. So as we go forward, we'll minimize some of the data. I know some of you love data, but many of you, as we've been talking, are actually more interested in some of the things we're going to do. We're going to do 4 different forums next year. We'll do these, but 4 forums that are about contribution. I've talked to a few of you about. We'll also bring up a little bit more here later as well. So the vital part of it is we'd like to be contribution for you in things that can help you have greater experience. And if we can at any point offer you something that can help enhance your life outside of money, we'd love to. But first we know where the simplicity in your finances and money. Next is the things we're going to talk about. Now, there's a little bit less of me than you saw last time. Has anybody noticed that? Yes, I was 246 pounds last time we talked. This time, actually, maybe a little bit less, but this time I'm 212. So, and I'm healthy. It's healthy weight loss. Here's what I've had a few people come after me, and why I brought this up is because somebody goes, one of my clients at the last session yesterday said, I didn't even recognize you. I wouldn't have until I saw you. I'm like, well, come on, really? But it is healthy weight loss, and somebody asked me, are you okay? Yes. Yes. I started with a gentleman, Dr. Gladden. I'm looking at human and optimizing human performance. One of the byproducts is there's 5 foods I can't eat. I don't eat sugary foods. I don't eat bread. I don't eat red meat. I don't eat some certain vegetables that weren't good for me. So as I run down this list, what happened is those were inflammation factors, and I carried about 34 extra pounds. So as I'm finding now, I weigh much less, I ache less, I have more energy in many cases, and we're really looking to optimize health. So don't worry, it's not a bad thing. It's been a good thing, but losing weight was not the goal. Losing weight has been the byproduct. We're going to bring some more of these ideas to you as I get some of these things we can share that are good for your health, because that's one of the 4 pillars we'll talk about. So I wanted to at least introduce that, and some of you have come up to me and already said it, so I wanted to just bring it to the whole group in case anybody else had questions. One of our goals in this is to make you great investors. One of these to make you a great investor. Now, there's a lot of timeless aspects that come from this, but I want to read a little bit of a quote that I've got from a phenomenal person. Anybody heard of Benjamin Graham? Benjamin Graham is the foremost teacher back at Columbia of Warren Buffett, of one of our great compatriots, which Nick Murray, which you've seen some of his articles we've sent as well. Both have been in the industry 50 years. But here, in my nearly 50 years of experience in Wall Street, I've found that I know less and less about what the stock market is going to do, but I know more and more about what investors ought to do, and that's a pretty vital change in attitude. That kind of underlines what we want to emphasize here, and that is there's 2 different aspects of markets. One is value, and one is price, and they're different. Value is constant and consistently rising. Price is wildly fluctuative and emotional. We're going to talk more about these concepts as we go forward, but I'm going to keep them that simple. Okay, I can amaze you with all these fun statistics and things that we think are smart, but I want to make sure this is the point we want to drive home. Price is fluctuating, so is technology from time to time, but value is consistent. So the value of what we're going to teach now without slides is the same. The price has just gone down because we can't show you on screen. Does that make sense in the correlation of the 2? So we'll get this one back up and running. But a lot of the basics that we want to take a look at here are really going to be based on timeless techniques. So when we talk about markets, when we talk about behavioral finance, you ever met somebody that just you don't enjoy talking to, and like you avoid them at all costs when you go to church or a social gathering because just a negative Nelly. Everything's negative. Everything's tough. Everything is like, Anybody hear that? Don't point at anybody in the room. We had the experience with one of our daughters recently at a baseball game to look at that and have a person like that sit right behind us. I think what was interesting is that it was a great learning opportunity for my kids and myself, more importantly, to act properly. When you hear somebody negative constantly, even if it's about you, how do you react? Now, instead of reacting, which is turn around and go, what do you mean by this? How should you respond? Should you respond at all? You don't know what their life has been. So some of these timeless things, too, you're going to find that reaction is what people do in the market. That drives prices up and down. That's visceral. It's deep, right? But when you respond and take time to look at it, as my wife would point out to me, maybe the way I should handle it would be a little bit different. Maybe I should be never turn around, never say anything, be very kind, which is a great point. So you get great learning and teaching experiences for kids and yourself. They're all over the place. We saw a bunch of these experiences yesterday driving home from Appleton. Traffic was merging into a lane, and I decided to slow the left lane down so people didn't all go in front of the people in the right lane. And we had some interesting character do some interesting stuff right next to us, and our response was, that's it. That's all it was, and it frustrated him to no end. But you've experienced this as well, right? So again, I got to the emotional stuff and talked about some of those because the behavioral finance is truly about that. It's about behavior. And you've seen this part before. I'll go through it quick. The people in your life, your home and workplace, and the news you watch. The more as you get into gratitude and start to appreciate things, it becomes important. When you read a news article, if you have a bend towards one side or another, it can be a 50-50 article. You'll pull 80 to 90% out of the opinion that you had coming in. That's extremely important for what I call reflection and self-realization, to go, news is really what you want to hear in many cases, okay? So be careful about that. Be open to other opinions. It's what made us great as a country, okay? Not the division it's giving us today. I'm not running for office. So what's interesting about this is you saw a slide last time. Remember the big dial that showed you what happens on the internet every 60 seconds? Why is our life becoming more complex? There is more coming at us than ever. Let me give you 60 seconds in the life of the internet. $139,000 hours of video are watched every 30 seconds. It's displaced what? Television as our source, because we can choose the content now. That's the good news. You can choose the content. But did you see what's coming at you every 60 seconds? No wonder life seems a little more complex, a little more overwhelmed. Anybody heard of FOMO? It's a disease that's out there today. Anybody heard of CRS? Tom's disease? They're growing. FOMO is fear of missing out. People have that all the time. It's what you look at, oh my gosh, I missed this. You know what Tom's disease is? Terrified of missing stuff. Anybody suffer from this? How about this? Anybody have CRS? Can't remember stuff. These three diseases are proliferating out there. Matter of fact, there's some new ones coming up from this. But I actually say when I'm sitting in front of kids at Junior Achievement, there are people and kids who are last year 9 years old, 4 of which want to be professional YouTubers as their career. Think about this. The first time I heard this, 5, 6 years ago, I went, well, what does that mean? This guy's making $1 million on YouTube? Yes. So you're finding people today, there's a guy in Iowa who makes $500,000 gaming. I told my daughters this, and they are so into it. How can I do that? Well, there's different ways, but still, the very landscape of jobs as we see that is changing. You've seen this really pervasive as you go through. But as you see the internet, it's not becoming less pervasive, but we can choice. This is a consumer economy. Do you want to choose to be more on Facebook or maybe less? If you want to know, and I don't have my phone here, but I view the phone, if this was it, it's probably the best and the worst invention in history. People say, isn't that great? I said, yes, and it's horrible. You got 24/7 access to everybody's everything, and did you really care what somebody ate 2 minutes ago in New York when they take a picture of their food? I got along pretty well before I knew that, right? I mean, you see, we're bombarded with the consistency of constantly negative news and focus on extremes, so much so, and here's one important thing. Did anybody hear the jobs report this morning? 230,000 jobs created in an economy that already had 3.9% unemployment. That is freaking fantastic. Did anybody hear about the fact that we collected more taxes than we've ever collected in history last year? No? Did anybody hear about the rest of the positive data that's occurring on a consistent basis? We are in one of the most prosperous times in the world, in history. Yet, what you're getting is, well, this is going to cause inflation and wage inflation and da-da-da-da-da-da. You're getting all these negative stories coming from these base economic fundamentals that historically have been really positive. So such a negativity in this world. Do you know anybody who's super positive about the economy, the market, the political? No. If you looked at the numbers, you should be. But if you look at the environment, we've never been in, I'd say, in this much of an upturn, except for maybe at the beginning of another upturn. We haven't been in this negative of a time, is the way people feel, in as long as I can remember. Because the last time this happened, we only had 5 news sources in the late 70s. So it's interesting as you go through. So we want to be very careful on some of these things. And Ken has some good perspective here.
Here's a piece, because a lot of people think it's different this time, right? Like 2 years ago, President Trump, right, got elected in the office. Wow, it's different this time, right? Everyone thinks it's different this time. It's not different this time. So this is actually from one of our coaches. He's been in the business 51 years. He was born in 1943. Some of you have lived during this time frame. So let me read why it's not different this time. Because we had Korea, as Trump called him, little missile boy or little rocket boy, right? We've heard that before, right? Everyone thinks it's different this time. But let's take a trip down memory lane. A lot of you have lived through this, so you're able to relate to some of this. For the last 75 years, right? To begin with, I was born into the most violent episode in human history, a 6-year global war that caused deaths of some 60 million people. Now that would be different this time. Followed by a nearly half-century of global thermonuclear standoff, which 2 superpowers basically were going to blow each other up, hence the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. More than 50,000 Americans died in the Korean War, then 50,000 more in Vietnam. Why were we over there, right? That was the whole conversation. 1 U.S. president died in office. A second was shot to death as he rode in a car in Dallas. A third was driven from office, certainly that he would otherwise have been impeached. It's not different this time, right? In a matter of weeks, in 1968, our nation's greatest civil rights leader and leading presidential candidate were murdered. 1968. Remember the oil embargo in 1970s? I heard a story from one of you guys saying that if you had an even number on your license plate, you could fill up that day. Remember that? If you had an odd number, I think it was the next day, or you had to wait in line, or wherever the case may be. It's not different this time. On the economic financial front, in my lifetime, the United States has experienced 12 economic recessions. There have been 14 bear markets. One of those declines, most recently 2007 and 2009, basically halved our portfolios at that point in time. Right? That was about a 50% drop during 2007, 2008, and 2009. That was almost 10 years ago, but people still think it was like yesterday. We lived through 3 major flash crashes: 1962, 2010, that one happened in 8 months, and Black Monday, 1987, the Dow Jones dropped 22%. It's not different this time, but a lot of people do think it's different. By the way, in 1943, when this gentleman was born, does anybody know what the S&P 500 was as far as like a value? 12. Does anybody know what the value of the S&P 500 is today? Just pushed over 2,900. Now that's a major multiple of things that are going on. So when Chris talks about value being created, we're talking about the price going up as well, but there was a massive amount of value created in the last 75 years. And we're about to see that again. So I thought that was a fun little trip down memory lane because it's not different this time. Stuff has been going on in our lives the whole time.
Yeah, one of the pieces we seek to offer is perspective. Is now different. It may be different in maybe the, I'm going to call it, the forms with which things are occurring, but not in the function of what's happening. So we've got to be very careful with those. But that's a great point when we go down memory lane. Now, the next portion, you've heard about bull and bear markets. Now, who here thinks they're fairly happy with the market performance in the last 2 years? 17. Okay, good. Every hand went up. Good. You know why? Because the market's up 57% when it comes to stocks. The portion of your portfolio that stocks up 57% in the last 2 years. That's amazing. That doesn't happen often. It's a poignant moment to look at this and say, how can the whole world be negative? Now, let me ask you a couple of questions here. Anybody know what an institutional investor is? You probably hear this on the news. Institutional investors, you know what that is? It's not people who are locked away. Although I guess they could be after my next stat. So when they surveyed them, as of last month, they were 57% in alternatives. Now, just so you know, alternatives are basically something that you have that's outside of your core portfolio. When you're 57% into anything, that is your core. So basically, smart investors, institutional investors, are mostly out of stocks at the biggest bull market they've seen in their lives. How smart is that? Why do we not waver? Because you have to be in it. One other great stat. So they did and I've now got some college professors, but one just left, so I'm going to tell this one. They took a survey of college professors and asked them how many of them were above average. What do you think it came back at? What percent thought they were maybe above average? Very close. Last time somebody guessed 70, 80, 100, it's 96%. 96% had the overconfidence to view themselves as above average college professors. So we need to go back and teach them what average means. Overconfidence just doesn't come with professors and people who are very smart. It comes with all of us. When you're buying or selling that stock or that mutual fund, somebody else or 8 million or 10 million other people are selling it going, there you go, idiot, you can have it. And you're going, this is the best thing since sliced bread. So you got to come to these two different ideas. Okay? Very, very important part, though, when it comes to overconfidence and some of what we're talking about, too, and some of the bases. These are what happen. When we have a long-term bull market, which we're 4 or 5 years into, the upturn is up almost 8 years. But when we're 7, 8, 9 years into it, you start to get people becoming complacent. Now, what does a bull market really look like? A bull market, does anybody know the definition of a bull market? It's probably less concern, but I can't tell you the exact definition, but I know we're in one. Anybody know what a bear market is? Technically, it's a drop of 20% from the previous high. That's a bear market. We had people from Morgan Stanley in January this year. Remember that 10% quick crash we had in January? Economists telling all of Morgan Stanley's 10,000 advisors to tell their clients that we're in a bear market. It's a new bear market. So he singularly redefined the 20% drop to 10 and said that we're in it. But that's what's happening today. We're looking for things to be negative on when things are super positive. Okay, so when it comes to bull and bear markets, the anatomy of it. So secular bull markets evolve in 6 different stages. I'm not going through this heavily, but there's aftershock and rebuilding. After the market corrected, oh my gosh, what's going on? The market pops up and nobody's ready for it, except for those who stayed in, right? Then there's guarded optimism. Now, does anybody here see anybody that they could view as guarded optimism, both in the media or themselves or their friends yet? I can make a case for we're not even there yet, but I'm going to give us we're at least there. Next comes enthusiasm, exuberance, unreality, and then cold water and disillusionment. That's the cycle. Now, what does this mean? Enthusiasm, exuberance, unreality? Remember, irrational exuberance was made by who? Remember the statement? Wasn't it your friend, Mr. Buffett?
It was. Yes.
Are we anywhere near that, where people are taking money out of their homes to go out and day trade, to go out and buy equities they shouldn't even be owning? We're not there yet, right? We're not seeing credit extended to everyone. So looking at this, we might have a ways to go. The cold water and disillusionment is what happens when nobody's expecting a correction except for those of us, because we've been teaching you about corrections forever. And we're going to continue it, okay? What kills a bull market? Probably last. These are a ton of super smart statements, so I'm not going to hit a lot, but global growth would have to decelerate. It's not. Wages and inflation would have to surge. They're not. Now, did anybody hear the proposal from Amazon yesterday? Minimum wage, $15. So to businesses that are in the service industry, they're like, whoa, Amazon, that may be fine, but you know what it's going to do? The new statistic shows that by 2025, more work will be done by robots than by humans. That's where we hit the tipping point. It's already happening now. We're not talking a lot about it. But you want to promote that super quick? Well, Bob doesn't show up for $15 an hour. This robot's here all the time. My economic stance is where? Now, there's human aspects of the world that are always going to be enhanced. Don't get me wrong. We'll always find different jobs for us. But it's going to shift some of the labor that we have in America. The Fed would have to tighten monetary policy significantly. It's not. It's simply meandering up. ECD would have to tighten policy. Credit growth would surge. Corporate animals, that's not an important one. Equities have to be expensive relative to stocks. They're actually at a 25% discount to bonds. Stocks at a 25% discount to the value of bonds right now. Investors would have to be euphoric about equities. They're not. We just talked about it. So the secular bull market, in many cases, has many years to run. To Nick Murray, who's been in the business 50 years, one of our good compatriots, he thinks this could be the biggest, longest, strongest bull market we've ever had in our lives. If so, fantastic. I'm in for that ride. This is where we need to be prepared for it. We need to watch saying, hey, because I'll start getting those phone calls. Hey, Chris, yeah. Hey, I've got this new thing. The guy down the street found this something.com, and they're going to change the world. And should we take 50% of our portfolio and put it in that? What, 60? You think? Maybe 60? No. This time, I'll be silent on the phone when you call that way. in disbelief. Perspective is, you've all lived through this. Back in the 20s, anybody hear about the Great Depression? Your parents taught you very well about it, right? We take Great Depression times into today, yet we're emerging, and you've all seen this on your charts, we're emerging into a bull market of which there has been no precedence. This one was done by industrialization. This was by the microprocessor. This one here is the internet revolution. The internet is literally revolutioning. When we started, matter of fact, many of you have been with me for 20 years or more. When we started in the business, the internet existed as DARPANET. Amazon didn't really exist. Yahoo didn't. They were coming up an algorithm at Netscape to search the internet. Today, the most pervasive companies in the world, are all internet-based. When you go down the S&P, JP Morgan's the first one you hit before you hit a non-internet company. Isn't that crazy? What's changed? Everything. The average life of a company now in the S&P is less than 20 years. Of a large company, the life of the company is less than 20 years on average. In the 50s, it was 60-plus years. It's changing, and we want to be prepared for that. The second thing that's probably changing most going along with this is longevity. Back here in 1900, you're going to live to 48. How many people here are older than 48 right now? I just made it this year, by the way. I just wanted to say that. This was also a fun one, by the way. When Zach was born, I was getting into this business. I wanted to say that because it's like one of those things where I can really sound old now. Zach was just born when I got this business. Anyway, perspective is great on that. But this chart here is very important. Ken and I were talking about this. Zach and I were looking at this chart. This is one thing that if you have children who are budding into the market, just starting to understand what it's about, grandchildren, this may be one of the single most important pieces you've seen. 1926 is when this starts to today. The blue is an up market. The red are the temporary punctuations of down markets. When prices have dropped well below value. At times, prices have gotten well above value. But make no mistake, value is consistent in here. Does anybody have any revelation about this? Look at how much time there is for blue. How much time is there in the reds? To me, this was a chart where, you've looked at all these stats, but I look at this and say, why would you ever try to time and get out? It's a fool's game. But people do it all the time. Okay, yesterday, we had a client yesterday. What did he say?
Yesterday the gentleman said after he saw this chart, he goes, well, the moral of the story is what? Stay in. I mean, it's really that simple. You have to stay in. There's only 6 or 7 times this happens throughout history in 80-some years. That's very difficult to time that out.
And Ken shares actually a great story. I'm going to ask him to share it now, too. It's kind of a fundamental story that he taught his kids about something, but it actually applies to this.
This is actually pretty funny. So, again, I spent, how many weeks? Well, a couple weeks with the kids in Disney. I had conversations with 7-year-olds, right? 7, 6, So my intellectual level is not very high. So now when we talk about simplicity, here's a good simplistic way to think about this. I was teaching my kids this. So the neighbor kids are older. They're 13 and 14 years old, but they want to have a water gun fight with our kids, okay? It's going to be challenging, right? So I was teaching my kids this. And my wife's like, why do you teach this and stuff? But this is what I taught them. This is my contribution to my family. So I said, kids, what's rule number 1 in a water gun fight? They're like, I don't know. Don't lose your water gun, right? Sounds simple, right? But what's rule number 1 in a basketball game? Don't lose your basketball. What's rule number 1 in stock investing? Don't lose your stocks.
Don't lose your stocks.
What's rule number 1 in the overall financial planning that we do for you? What's rule number 1? For $100,000, what's rule number 1?
$100,000. No.
It's worth $100,000, right?
Stop that. Yeah, stop. He's giving away $100,000, not $100,000.
What's rule number 1 in financial planning? Stay in the course. Do not lose sight of what?
Plan.
Your financial plan. These are impulses that people make. These are impulses. I think everybody answered that question, by the way, so we have to give out like
$7 million worth of candy bars.
One of the reasons why you hire us is what you told us over the years, is that we won't let you make that impulse decision. It's your money, of course, right? We know that, you know that. But one of the things that we're good at is staying the course, right? Keeping this thing called perspective in place. Mm-hmm. We will dissuade you every time that you get the phone call about the .com, right, the guy down the street. We will dissuade you from that. Some of those work, most of them don't. So that's one of the reasons why you hire us, is to not allow you to make that impulse decision on, hey, it feels too good right now. Sometimes you're at the club or you're with your friends out, man, what's next? Can this market keep going higher and higher and higher? It's a conversation that happens. Wow, times are really good. My portfolio's going up. What's next? Right? Everyone's worried about what's next. May not be anything.
Yeah, so much so I had a client about 2 years ago whose neighbor worked for Morgan Stanley. And he's a great client of ours, been with us for a long time, got through that correction. Matter of fact, he retired in 2007 October, right before the 2008 crash. Couldn't have retired at a worse time. And he made it through, he's doing very well. But he, 2 years ago, had a neighbor, this guy's saying that the market's going to crash big time. It's going to be pretty heavy this year. And really it's going to be, quite rough. And I said, and what's your point? He goes, well, should we do something about it? Yeah, you can smile at him next time you see him. He's trying to bait me into, because what do you want to do about this? 2 years later, those conversations typically end with 2 years later, me bringing up, say, so how's your friend there? And then Morgan Stanley, oh, I don't see him much anymore. But at the time, this was a visceral, hey, we should be doing something. Smart people are doing stuff. I say, well, you can say smart, but I'll classify it as something different. It's not timeless. So the average bull market's 9 years. The average downturn is 1.4. You know the stats. Matter of fact, this is important. Can the market go higher? 1946 to 65, it was 655% upturn. Pretty impressive, but eclipsed by 1982 to 2000. 1,400%. Where are we now? 315. It may be 320 before a bear market. It may be 1,500. I can't tell you that. There's no future predictability. If you see me predicting something in the future, cut me off right there. I'm not going to be baited into that game. I do think, though, that tomorrow the sun will rise or not. I'm bold enough to make that. So as you go forward, one important piece about this, too, is what happens if the market corrects? We're going to talk about that.
So market corrections, this is all what we fear, right? What's next, the next drop. So Chris gets to talk about the markets going up. Kind of fun, right? I get to talk about the markets going down, right? I don't know how this works out, but they are critical. They are critical to the long-term success. They're swift and visceral. They come without warning. Their length of stay is unknown, right? They're not pleasant when they're around. Now, I think that might be the definition of my in-laws. Potentially. Maybe. Okay.
Careful.
So they know I'm joking. I love them
3.
dearly. But they're Colombians, and Colombians love to be together, right? They love to hug each other, eat food, and just drink and have a good time. That's what they do. Like Italians, right? They leave scars on who react poorly. Obviously, if you get out, there's no chance of giving that money back because the markets go back up. You're out. You're never going to get the money back. They're temporary and necessary. They're vital to the long-term return of your portfolio. They're not fun. They're not fun to go through. Mm-hmm. And those who are new clients in the room, those who've been with Chris and myself for a long time, you get the idea of what we're doing with you as far as staying in the markets. But those who are new and newly retired, it's been 9-10 years since we've seen a market correction, right? It's different when you're accumulating money and you're working, you're putting money into your 401k, right? That's different. Now all of a sudden we're in retirement. Now what are we doing? Now we're taking money out of our portfolio.
Right.
And the market goes down 30%. We've seen really, really smart people do really, really goofy things at that point in time. Your back is against the wall. We are here for you. If you're newly retired and we do go through a market correction, which we will at some point in time, it's not if, it's when, we will be there with you because that is a very trying time when you're newly retired and we see a market correction. I wanted to bring that up to you guys. They're essential to the health of a long-term bull market. So we need market corrections to go higher, which is what that is saying. This is the annual end of the world. It's a chart you can't see from where you're sitting probably, but the green bars explain the years that the markets are up, okay, or the markets are down. So if they're halfway above, it's up, and if it's down. But the whole point of it is that volatility, the idea of 10% corrections, 14% corrections that we see are very, very normal. Mm-hmm. They happen all the time. The average return is 10%. The average throughout the year, the intra-year, throughout the year drop is around 14%. This happened this year, if you remember what happened this year, right? This hasn't happened in 3 or 4 years with us as far as the markets go, but now it happened this year. January, you got your statement. At the end of January, you got it in February. You're up about 6, 7, 8%. Pretty good start to the year, right? And then what happened? February came. Then March, April, May, June, July came. Then all of a sudden August came, your statement went back up. Now September, you're going to get into here in a few days, it can be down a little bit. But we're starting to see this volatility. It's back now. It hasn't been back for the last 3 or 4 years. It's been pretty much, you get your January statement, oh, I made some money. Get your February statement, oh, I made some money. Oh, get my March statement, made some money. Now it's kind of like, where are we at now? Now the volatility is back in the market. It's a very important piece to pay attention to, but it's very, very normal. It's very, very normal. Doesn't feel normal, but it is.
Yeah, at the beginning of the year, the S&P was at 2874. 2874, whew, right? Well, as of August 24th, it was at 2872. That's 9 months of what? Nothing, right? Let me actually change that for you. It was 9 months of some of the greatest value creation in history. The price you were paying in January was 19.5 times earnings, almost 20 times earnings. Right now, it's 16 times earning. Right back to normal. So these 9 months have increased dividends, innovation, earnings like we've never seen. But this is the decoupling. Value has gone up tremendously. But Mr. Market is an irrational being. You're going to see his name. The rational exuberance of super excited and super pessimistic is occurring right now. So when you watch that, price doesn't correlate with value. We'll talk more about that as we go on. So looking at this, what does a correction look like? You know, you're looking at these corrections. What does a 20% correction look like from each one of these? Well, here's an important piece. In the Dow, that's a 5,293-point drop. Does that freak anyone out? I'm telling you, a 20% drop is going to happen, and 20% is 5,293 points. If you remember the correction we had, the Dow bottomed at about 6,400, roughly. Now, the drop could essentially be more than that, and that's where people have an anchoring perception. Oh my gosh, if it drops 5,000 points, what's happened? So I could have framed this differently, said, What will you do if the Dow drops 5,000 points? Most people's response, ask one of your friends that question. It's only 20%. It's a normal correction. Okay, so we want to bring that up now because it makes it much easier when it happens to know that that exists.
And the headlines are going to be what? So if you go back to that,
Yeah.
the headlines, because the Dow's never been higher, right?
Right.
So the point drop has never been greater. So it's going to be the biggest drop in history of the stock market, right? That's what's going to happen. Careful with those. Careful with those.
Yeah, statistics can lie. Because remember, on average, it's a big drop. But 1 foot in a bucket of ice, 1 foot in a burning fire, on average, I'm pretty good. So with the next portion I have here, I'm going to bring Zach up. Zach is our resident market expert. He goes through and does a lot of I call it background and research data on what we're having. So I'm going to bring Zach up to actually show you what's going on with the market. We're not going to go through this stuff heavily because in the second portion of the program we have a couple things we want to cover that are more important. But we want to hit some of these visceral points that you normally will see from us, minimize them, and show you some of the pieces we have here. So Zach, take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. Also, just my gratitude statement. I'm extremely grateful to be in front of you here today again, for those of you that were at the summer. But let's just take a look at what happened this year since January 1st. And so the top line is the S&P 500 has gone up 9.04% this year. So even though we saw that initial volatility in January, it's turning out to be a great year once again for the S&P 500. So if we look at the next line, we're looking at the green line right here. That is international large cap, down 3.02% this year. The next line down, 3.31, that's bonds. And then the most volatility that we've seen this year in the market is emerging markets, which is down 10.44%. Now, what does this mean? How does it compare to 2017? Well, 2017, emerging markets was up 37%. International was up 26%, and the S&P was up 21%. So what does that tell us? This shows us this is the best example of why rebalancing matters that we could possibly show you. Because last year, when these were inverted, we sold at a higher price and bought more value, and that is the best example we could possibly show you of rebalancing.
Absolutely.
And also, just a couple quick facts about the S&P 500. The S&P 500, as many of you know, top 500 large capitalization companies in the world. We get a lot of questions on the composition inside of the S&P 500. What's in there? How is it weighted? What does it mean? And so many of you have heard FANG stocks, right? We hear about them all the time, every time on the news. FANG this, FANG that. Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. And if you ask Chris, it's FANG 'em, because he adds Microsoft in there as well.
I do. I like making up my own words, too.
But that actually, those 5 companies, 6 companies, account for 13% of the S&P 500. In comparison, the bottom 200 companies of the S&P 500 only account for less than 10%. So if the bottom 200 companies went out of business tomorrow and their share price went to 0, we would not see a 10% correction in the S&P 500. Also, another question we have, and Chris mentioned it earlier.
By the way, Zach sits and he comes up with these facts all the time. Just so you know, they're amazing facts, but they're important to know about the composition of this thing we call the S&P. You hear about it every night. And then the Dow is even worse. It's only 30 stocks. Anyway.
And for a little perspective as well, we had a couple questions come in about, well, we're super technology heavy as well. Possibly. Right now, the S&P 500 is 21% technology, almost 20%, a quarter, almost a quarter. In 1999 and 2000, right before the tech bubble, it was 34%. So for history, we're not as overweighted as it appears.
Absolutely. And in the tech bubble as well, GE was the #1 capitalization company in the world. ExxonMobil was right behind it. Guess where they are in the top 10 now? GE is not even in the top 10, not 50. You start looking at this, and it's a massive change on a quick basis. If you don't adapt today, you are disrupted, dismantled, and taken out. So it's amazing. Eastman Kodak, on the day Instagram was bought for $2.2 billion with 12 employees, Eastman Kodak filed bankruptcy. Eastman Kodak invented digital photography. It's crazy.
And so then looking at the next slide, what has happened since 2009, so about the last 10 years. S&P is up 314%. International emerging markets, is 115%. International large cap is 110, and bonds are 4.83. What is the best thing about this chart is that this is at the bottom of the debt crisis in March of 2009. And right now, the 10-year return from today, so going back to September of 2008, the market return is 4 to 6%, depending if you include dividends. But of March of next year, when that 10-year return hits from March 1st of 2009, it's going to be over 10%. So when people that aren't in the market right now or people thinking about investing see that, that might be where that enthusiasm and that exuberance comes in that side of the bull market that Chris mentioned earlier.
Right, because at a 4% return, people are going, I can get a bond or a CD for 4%. I'm not that excited, right? When it's 10%, when it's double digits, what do people think? Oh my God, I got to get me some of that. I'm freaking missing out. I've seen it before. I've been around long enough to live this through a couple of cycles now. The first cycle in 2000, I didn't believe. So giving you kind of my maturity. I didn't believe. I thought, oh, well, this is okay. This will pass. 2000 rocked us to the core. I had no idea what to do. But we stayed true to what we did. 2008 happened. I was pretty certain I knew we should stay with it, and all you had conversations about it. I was very strong on that one. But still in the back of my mind, it was, God, I really hope this works. Only some kidding in that. The next one, I'm certain. I've seen it, I've studied it, I've been through it, I've matured, and I understand wisdom now. So these stats lead to that. You want great advice, you want to know what's in it. I've been reading books about the great investors and their great mistakes. All of them are, do not let molehills turn into mountains and poison your mind. Also, know what you can control. You cannot control the Fed. You cannot control Donald Trump's tweeting. You cannot control South Korea. You can't control any of that. So why worry about it? We can worry about what happened, but let's just be prepared for now and today to simplify. So it's a good point. I got way off subject, but that's pretty common for me.
The next slide here. Most of you guys have seen this in a lot of your client reviews, but it's always great to look at and a fresh reminder. To view your portfolio as very long term. And if you're looking first at the blue line, the steady line, that represents value, that represents constant rebalancing, sticking to a plan, and that remains constant all the way through. The orange line, that represents price. That is uncertain, it's volatile, it's human, and it changes daily. And that's not what we want to watch, and that's not what we want to make decisions off of.
Right, but the media will quote the red. It will not quote the fact that, don't worry, your value is the same as it was, even though the price has dropped. It won't say that. So that's where we want to prepare you. Now, you'll be over-prepared, which is great, because being over-prepared for this when it comes to lifeboat drills and this happens, the phone calls of distress for me are not the phone calls of, oh my God, Chris, should I sell out? You know what it is? Should we be, it's the same thing. Oh my God, Chris, should we be buying? I don't have any money to buy. We should be converting. All the things that we've taught over time, you guys make phone calls to me about. So it's amazing. We get a wholesaler, somebody's in the industry and comes in and talks. You getting all sorts of calls? Yeah, people really want to convert. They want to buy more. They want to do this. And they're like, well, that's not what I meant. Okay, but our goal is to continue to make you great investors that way. Thank you, Zach. That's awesome. Appreciate it. So now, here's the thing. What can we do about this? There's some phenomenal planning ideas we've talked about with you so far this year. Anybody remember a tax cut? Anybody really understand the tax cut and the new tax act that happened this year? Most of America doesn't. Matter of fact, today they had a Section 199A discussion to finally talk about what it meant to be a 20% pass-through organization. Now, this was passed 10 months ago. There's still things in here that haven't been addressed. There's no, as we're going to talk about here, when you do required minimum distribution, charitable RMD, there's no 1099 charitable RMD. There's no 1099 for it. So there's a ton of stuff still yet defined. But here's some things you can take action on.
Yeah, here's
now.
A couple timely planning ideas for everybody. So the first one is called qualified charitable distributions. So we all know in our IRAs, our pre-tax IRAs, right, what was a 401k probably at some point in time, when we take money out of those accounts, we have to do what? We have to pay some taxes, right? All right? What this is all about is if we are older than 70 and a half, we have to be over 70 and a half. At that point in time, we have to take something out of our portfolio called required minimum distributions, RMDs, right? Happens when you're 70 and a half, and the year you turn 70 and a half. Now, what we can do with this is, now, when you take money out as an RMD, we have to do what? Pay tax, right?
Yes.
if you're charitably inclined and you enjoy giving money to your churches, the other organizations that you're part of, what we can do is use some of your IRA distribution, the required minimum distribution, and we can send it directly to your church. That shows up on your taxes as non-taxable income. So if you have to take $20,000 out and you want to send $10,000 to your charity of choice, only $10,000 shows up on your taxes. The other $10,000 that you just sent to the church is a non-taxable event to you. Does that make sense to everybody? Mm-hmm. It's called qualified charitable distributions. We can take advantage of that.
And one of the reasons why that's important now, and I forgot to mention this before, is it's estimated that only 7% of you will itemize with the new tax law.
Right.
7%. So in this room, think about that. 7, maybe 10 of you will itemize. So the benefit of this is, and these are ideas to say, let's take advantage of this new tax law. We've talked a lot about this. And this is a big fear. Ken and I have talked to clients about this. When the church, donation bin comes around, when it's passed, people are really concerned about not putting something in and how it looks. Because when we send the charitable RMDs in, you don't do that anymore. So what we've said is we've created a note, and you can get this, that says, already gave my charitable RMD. You put it in the envelope, you put it in, and you put a little happy poster or some joke about it, something there. So when they open it up, it's like, oh, cool. But it still gives you the idea that you're passing the envelope as it goes along.
Or you could actually make a copy of your distribution form that we do for you.
You could.
Stick it right in there.
Yeah.
Stick it.
The whole point is, it's interesting when you come up with something I've done for 40 years and something we suggest to change it. Oh, but I wouldn't feel right about that. Well, right. We've got ways to help you with that.
It's a way to save you some money. The second one is donor-advised funds. This goes back to charitable giving as well. This one, you do not have to be any certain age to do this one.
Correct.
All right? This one really has to do, though, with the idea that Chris mentioned 7% of you in America is only going to itemize, only 7%. The other 93% is going to take the standard deduction. That is increased this year with the new tax overhaul, right? There's a double standard deduction. It's $24,000 for a couple, $26,000 if you're 65 and older, so on and so forth. So a lot of our giving that we're doing to the organizations that we feel strongly about is going to get kind of absorbed in this new standard deduction. We're not going to get the benefit from it like we were in past years. So this is called a donor-advised fund. What you want to think about here is if you do give money to the charities of your choice, let's talk about maybe lumping a couple years together, 2, 3, 4 years maybe, because what happens here is when we put the money into this donor-advised fund, we still control the money, you still control your money, you still control who you give it to, but we get a tax deduction because of it. That's wildly different than what's going to happen if we don't do the donor-advised fund. Again, you don't have to do these, but if we can put more money in your pockets and optimize your wealth, that's really what we're trying to do here. They're called donor-advised funds. So next time you meet with Chris, myself, during a review, I'll be asking some questions probably about your giving, and if you're so inclined to do so. If you're not, no worries. But if you are, let's try to find a way to maximize this. Do we give securities to the church? Do we give cash to the church? These are questions that we're going to talk about.
So a lot of little tiny enhancements like this. It may seem small, but when you look at the net result, we're not concerned with what you make, it's what you keep that's important. So if we can help you keep an extra 0.5%, an extra percent, it makes a huge difference ongoing. And when tax law changes like this, we want to be on it. We know it very well. We want to see how it works for you. And some of you, it may not make a difference, but many of you, it will. So we're going to ask a few different questions. That's a great point.
The last one on there, we mentioned before, Roth conversions. If we go through a market correction, which we will at some point in time, instead of freaking out, which we don't do anymore, right? Because we don't watch the news anymore. We don't do any of that, right?
Nobody does.
We stopped doing that many, many years ago, right? We stopped.
It's okay.
But taking Roth conversion simply means, in English, taking money from your traditional IRA and converting it to your Roth IRA. In a Roth IRA, we never have to pay tax on the gains or earnings ever again. And they're not subject to the 70.5 rule, which is the required minimum distributions. So that money can sit in there and grow for a while. So that's taking money from your pre-tax account and making it after tax inside of an IRA. That's a Roth conversion. So there'll be plenty of opportunities. With the new tax law, we're probably going to reach out, if we feel you're a candidate for it and you feel you're a candidate for it, we're probably going to reach out to your accountant and run some numbers with them. Because with the new standard deduction, there's a chance that We can maybe convert $5,000 of our money, $10,000. There's small little pieces we're doing for you, but they make massive amounts of difference later on for you. So just know that that'll happen for you as well.
And did you hear that Jeff Bezos is going to open up a restaurant on the moon? The only problem is there's very little atmosphere.
Ding, ding.
I adapted that one, so that's not just a kid joke. I put Jeff Bezos in it. So we do have a quick break here. Now, here's what I want to offer, though. We've got about 10 or 15 minutes, but some of the most important stuff that we have coming up, a bit on technology, a lot on simplicity, changing your life, and some of the things we want to contribute on an ongoing basis. We're going to ask for your feedback, too, be it here or be it when you take it home and send it back.